There are battles that history barely remembers. Small mountains in distant countries where men fought and died for strategic positions that meant everything in the moment and nothing in the grand narrative. Monte Castelo, Italy, winter of 1945. A mountain in the Apennines that Brazilian soldiers tried to take 5 times. 5 times they climbed through snow and machine gun fire. 5 times they were thrown back. 5 times they left their dead on the frozen slopes. Until the 6th time, when they finally took the summit and planted the Brazilian flag on ground soaked with the blood of men who had traveled 5,000 miles to die on a mountain they'd never heard of. This is not a story about strategy or tactics or the Italian campaign. This is a story about a man who went to war and found something he wasn't looking for. A Brazilian soldier who left the favelas of Rio de Janeiro and ended up in the mountains of Italy. A Prasinha, as they called themselves. A little soldier who climbed Monte Castelo 6 times and somehow survived. Who fell in love in the ruins of war. Who brought that love back across the ocean and spent 60 years trying to forget the mountain while never quite succeeding. His name was João da Silva, a common name for an uncommon man. He was 22 years old when he shipped out to Italy. He was 23 when he met Francesca. He lived to be 84. And on his deathbed in 2007, surrounded by his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, he asked his wife to bring him a box he kept hidden in the back of a closet. A box she had never been allowed to open. Inside was a letter he had written in 1945 and never sent. A letter he had carried for 62 years. A letter he finally asked her to read after he was gone. This is that letter. This is his story. A story of war and love, of horror and hope, of the mountain that tried to kill him, and the woman who saved him. This is the story of Monte Castelo. This is the story of João and Francesca. This is what war looks like when it doesn't destroy you completely, when it leaves just enough of you alive to find something worth living for.
Francesca, my love, if you are reading this, then I am finally free. Free from the mountain. Free from the weight I have carried since 1945. Free to tell you everything I never could while I was alive. You know some of it. You lived through some of it. But there are things I never told you. Things I never told anyone. Things that only the dead should know. But I am dead now, so I can finally speak. I can finally tell you what really happened on Monte Castelo. What I saw. What I did. What I survived. And most importantly, how I found you. How in the middle of hell itself, I found heaven. How the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best thing that ever happened to me. How war, which destroys everything it touches, somehow brought us together. I want to start at the beginning. Not the beginning of Monte Castelo, but the beginning of me. The boy I was before I became a soldier. Before I saw things no person should see. Before the mountain changed me forever. I want you to know who I was, so you can understand what war took from me and what you gave back. I was born in Rocinha, Rio de Janeiro, in 1922. The favela on the hillside where the rich people never looked. My father worked on the docks. My mother cleaned houses in Copacabana. We were poor, but we were happy. I had 3 brothers, 2 sisters. We shared 2 rooms and slept on mats on the floor and ate rice and beans every day and thought we had everything we needed. Maybe we did. I wanted to be a musician. I played the cavaquinho, a small guitar. Not well, but with passion. I would sit on our doorstep in the evening and play while the favela came alive around me. Samba music floating up from the bars below. Children playing football in the narrow streets. Women cooking and talking and laughing. It was a good life. A simple life. The kind of life that seems impossibly distant now, like it happened to someone else. Then the war came. Not to Brazil at first. We heard about it on the radio. Hitler in Europe, the Japanese in the Pacific. It seemed very far away. Not our problem. We had our own problems. Poverty, hunger, corruption. The war was something that happened to other people in other places. Until 1942. When German U-boats started sinking Brazilian ships, when our government declared war, when suddenly it became our problem too. They started conscripting in 1943. taking young men from the favelas and the farms and sending them to become soldiers. I was 21. I had no choice. Not really. You could volunteer and get slightly better treatment, or wait to be conscripted and be treated like cattle. I volunteered. Seemed like the smart choice at the time. I've spent 62 years wondering if it was. They trained us for 6 months, turned us from favela boys into soldiers, taught us to shoot, to march, to follow orders without question. They gave us American uniforms and American weapons and tried to turn us into an American-style fighting force. But we were Brazilians. We played samba in the barracks. We seasoned our rations with pepper sauce we brought from home. We remained ourselves even as they tried to make us something else. We shipped out in July 1944. 15,000 Brazilian soldiers on ships crossing the Atlantic. Most of us had never left Rio. Some had never seen the ocean before joining the army. Now we were crossing it to fight in a war we barely understood for a country we'd never seen. The ship took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of seasickness and bad food and growing dread about what waited for us on the other side. We landed in Naples in September. Italy was already a year into the campaign. The Germans were retreating slowly up the peninsula, fighting for every mountain, every river, every town. The Allies were pushing them back, but the cost was enormous. We were being sent to reinforce the offensive. Fresh troops for the meat grinder. That's what we were. Replacements for the dead and wounded who had come before us. They attached us to the American Fifth Army, sent us into the Apennine Mountains to help break through the German Gothic Line. The Gothic Line was a defensive position the Germans had built across the mountains. Concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, minefields, artillery positions. It ran for 200 miles and it was designed to stop the Allied advance cold. Our job was to break through it. Our job was to take the high ground. Our job was to take Monte Castelo. Monte Castelo. Just a mountain. Not even a very tall one. 977 meters. But it dominated the valley. Whoever held Monte Castelo controlled the approach to the Po Valley and the route to Germany. The Germans knew this. They had fortified it heavily. Machine guns, mortars, artillery observers. They could see everything from up there. Every approach, every attack. And they were waiting. We attacked for the first time on November 24th, 1944. Thanksgiving Day for the Americans. We climbed through snow and mud and German machine gun fire. We got halfway up before they pushed us back. 16 dead, 43 wounded. We retreated down the mountain carrying our casualties and wondering what the hell we had gotten ourselves into. We attacked again on November 29th. Same result. Climbed halfway. Got slaughtered. Retreated. More dead. More wounded. More boys from the favelas and farms of Brazil left on that frozen mountain because some general decided we needed to take it. December 12th. Third attack. This time we made it further. Almost to the summit. We could see the German positions. We could see their faces. Then their mortars opened up, and we were caught in the open and men were dying all around me, and we had to retreat again. I carried my friend Carlos down the mountain. He had taken shrapnel to his stomach. He died before we reached the bottom. I can still hear him screaming. December 18th. Fourth attack. We were smarter this time. We waited for artillery support. American guns pounded the mountain for hours before we attacked. We climbed through the smoke and the snow and the bodies from previous attacks that had frozen in place like statues. We reached the summit. For about 10 minutes, we held the summit. Then German counterattack came and we were outnumbered and out of ammunition and we had to retreat again. I lost count of how many died that day. January 5th, 1945. Fifth attack. We were depleted by now, exhausted, traumatized. We had taken so many casualties that they had to bring in replacements. Boys, even younger than us. Some of them 18, 17, lying about their age to enlist. They looked at us veterans with awe. We looked at them with pity because we knew what was waiting for them on that mountain. This attack was the worst. The Germans were ready. They had reinforced. They knew we were coming. We climbed into a wall of fire. Machine guns, mortars, artillery. Men died before they got 50 meters up the slope. The snow turned red. The screaming never stopped. I saw a boy, couldn't have been more than 18, take a bullet through the throat. He drowned in his own blood in the snow while I held his hand because there was nothing else I could do. We retreated again. We had failed 5 times. 5 times we had climbed that mountain. 5 times we had been thrown back. We had lost hundreds of men. For nothing. We still didn't hold Monte Castelo. The mountain had beaten us. The Germans had beaten us. And we were broken. They pulled us off the line for a week. Gave us time to rest, to recover, to absorb replacements. We were stationed in a small village called Porretta Terme, at the base of the mountains. It was a miserable place, half destroyed by shelling. Most of the civilians had fled. Those who remained were starving, traumatized, caught between the Germans above and the Allies below. That's where I met you. February 12th, 1945. I remember the date because it was my 23rd birthday. Some birthday. I was sitting in the ruins of a church, smoking a cigarette, trying not to think about the 6th attack we knew was coming. Trying not to think about the 5th attack. Trying not to think about Carlos dying in my arms. Trying not to think at all. You came around the corner carrying a bucket of water. You were 19 years old, thin from hunger, dirty from the war, but beautiful. God, you were beautiful. Your eyes, I remember your eyes, dark and deep and full of life despite everything, despite the war and the hunger and the destruction all around us. You had life in your eyes when everything else was death. You saw me sitting there. You stopped. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. 2 strangers in the ruins of war. You didn't speak Portuguese. I didn't speak Italian. But something passed between us in that moment. Some recognition. Some connection. Something that transcended language and nationality and the insanity of the world around us. You smiled. I will never forget that smile. In the middle of hell, you smiled at me. And something in me that had been frozen since Monte Castelo began to thaw. Something I thought was dead started to wake up. Hope, maybe. Or just the memory of being human instead of a machine designed to kill and survive. I tried to talk to you, my terrible Italian, your confused expression. We laughed. Actually laughed. I hadn't laughed in months. The sound of it felt foreign, like I had forgotten how. But there we were, laughing in the ruins, and for just a moment the war didn't exist. You offered me water from your bucket. I drank. It was the best water I had ever tasted, not because there was anything special about it, but because you gave it to me, because it was an act of kindness in a place where kindness had become extinct, because you saw me as a human being instead of just another soldier. We started meeting after that, every day if we could. You would come to the church ruins. I would bring whatever food I could scrounge from the army supplies. We would sit together and try to communicate with gestures and broken words and drawing in the dirt. I learned Italian. You learned Portuguese. Slowly, over days and weeks, we built a language between us. Our own private language made of 2 tongues and the universal grammar of human connection. You told me about your family. Your father had died fighting for the Italian army in North Africa. Your mother had died in the bombing. Your younger brother had been conscripted by the Germans and forced to fight for them. You hadn't heard from him in months. You were alone, surviving in the ruins, waiting for the war to end, waiting for a future that seemed impossible. I told you about Rio, about the favela, about my family, about the music I used to play. I told you about Monte Castelo, about the 5 attacks, about Carlos and the others who had died, about the fear that lived in my stomach like a stone, about the certainty that the 6th attack would be my last, that I would die on that mountain and never see Rio again, never play music again, never have the life I had dreamed of. You listened. You held my hand. You didn't tell me everything would be okay, because we both knew it might not be. You just sat with me in my fear, and your presence made it bearable. That's what love is, I think. Not making the bad things go away, but sitting with someone in the darkness so they're not alone. We had 3 weeks. 3 weeks of meeting in the church ruins. 3 weeks of learning each other's languages. 3 weeks of falling in love in the most unlikely place at the most unlikely time. 3 weeks of finding something beautiful in the middle of horror. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Then February 21st came. The order came down. Sixth attack. Final push. This time with American support. This time with tanks and airstrikes and everything they could throw at the mountain. This time we would take Monte Castelo or die trying. For most of us, probably both. I told you the night before. We met in the church one last time. I told you we were attacking in the morning, that this might be the last time we saw each other. You cried. I cried. We held each other in the ruins and promised things we had no right to promise. I promised I would come back. You promised you would wait. We were both lying. We both knew we were lying. But sometimes lies are all we have. The attack began at dawn, February 21st, 1945. The sixth assault on Monte Castelo. This time was different. This time we had American tanks supporting us. American airstrikes had pounded the German positions all night. American artillery prepared the way. We climbed through smoke so thick we could barely see. But we climbed. The Germans fought hard. They always fought hard. But they were exhausted too. They had been holding that mountain for months. They had fought off 5 attacks. They were as depleted as we were. And this time, with the American support, the balance finally tipped. We pushed through their defenses. We took the summit. We held it. After 6 attacks, after hundreds of dead, after months of failure, we finally took Monte Castelo. I survived. I don't know how. Men died all around me. I saw things on that mountain that I will never speak of. I did things I will never speak of, but I survived. When the fighting ended and we held the summit and the Brazilian flag was planted on the peak, I was alive. Covered in blood, most of it not mine. Deafened by the artillery. Traumatized beyond comprehension, but alive. We held Monte Castelo for the rest of the war. The Gothic line was broken. The Germans retreated. We pushed them back through the mountains. Village by village, we liberated northern Italy. It wasn't easy. They fought for every meter. But the momentum had shifted. We were winning. The end was coming. I found you again in March. I got a day's leave and I went back to Poretta Terme. I ran through the village looking for you. Terrified that you had died. That the shelling had killed you. That I had survived the mountain only to lose you. But you were there. You were alive. And when you saw me, when you realized I had kept my promise, you ran to me and we held each other and neither of us could speak because we were both crying too hard. The war in Italy ended in May 2nd, 1945. The Germans surrendered. It was over. We had won. But victory felt hollow. So many dead. So much destroyed. What had we won, really? A mountain. A country torn apart. The right to say we had defeated fascism at the cost of a generation of young men. Some victory. They wanted to send us home. Back to Brazil. Our job was done. But I didn't want to go. Not without you. I asked you to come with me. To cross the ocean. To leave Italy and start a new life in Brazil. It was an insane request. You barely knew me. I barely knew you. We had spent maybe a month together total. But war makes you desperate. War makes you grab onto anything good because you never know how long it will last. You said yes. I still don't know why. Maybe you had nothing left in Italy. Maybe you were as desperate as I was. Maybe you loved me. I like to think you loved me. Even then. Even when we barely knew each other. I like to think that what we found in those ruins was real. It took 6 months to arrange. Paperwork, permissions, military bureaucracy. But I was stubborn. I had survived Monte Castelo. I could survive bureaucracy. We were married in November 1945 in Naples. A small ceremony. No family. Just a few of my fellow soldiers and a priest who spoke Portuguese and Italian. You wore a dress you had sewn yourself from parachute silk. I wore my uniform. We were married in a destroyed church in a destroyed city, and it was the happiest day of my life. We sailed to Brazil in December, 3 weeks across the Atlantic. You were terrified. You had never left Italy. You didn't speak Portuguese well. You were going to a country you'd never seen to live with a family you'd never met in a favela you couldn't imagine. But you came. You held my hand on that ship and you came. My family welcomed you. My mother cried when she met you. She had lost one son already, killed in the last months of the war. She was terrified she would lose me too. When I came home with a wife, when she saw that I was alive and in love and trying to build a life, she cried with relief. You became her daughter. She loved you as much as I did. We built a life in Rio. I used my military benefits to buy a small house in the city. Not in the favela, but not far from it. I got a job in construction. You learned Portuguese. You adapted. You made friends. You became Brazilian while somehow remaining Italian. You taught our children both languages. You cooked Italian food with Brazilian ingredients. You built bridges between two worlds and made them one. We had 4 children: Maria, Antonio, Carlos, named for my friend who died on the mountain, and Lucia. We raised them with love and discipline and music. I taught them cavaquinho like my father taught me. You taught them Italian songs. Our house was always full of music and laughter and the smell of your cooking. It was the life I had dreamed of in those church ruins. The life I thought I would never have. The life you gave me. But the mountain never left me. You knew that. You saw it in my nightmares. Heard me screaming in my sleep. Saw me flinch at loud noises. Watched me drink too much sometimes, trying to drown the memories. You never judged. You never demanded explanations. You just held me when the nightmares came and reminded me that I was home, that I was safe, that the war was over. But was it? Is war ever really over for those who fought it? I came home in 1945, but part of me never left Monte Castelo. Part of me is still on that mountain, climbing through the snow, watching my friends die. The boy who played cavaquinho in Rocinha died on that mountain. The man who came home was someone else, someone harder, someone scarred, someone who had seen things that changed him forever. You loved me anyway. That's the miracle. You loved the man who came back even though he wasn't quite the man you met. You loved me through the nightmares and the drinking and the days when I couldn't get out of bed because the weight of memory was too heavy. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. You saved me, Francesca. The mountain tried to kill me, but you saved me. We had 62 years together. 62 years of marriage. We raised our children. We watched them grow and marry and have children of their own. We grew old together. Your hair turned gray. My hands became arthritic. We slowed down, but we were together. Every morning I woke up next to you was a morning I had stolen from death. Every day was a gift the mountain had tried to take from me. We went back to Italy once, in 1995, for the 50th anniversary of the war's end. There was a ceremony at Monte Castelo. Veterans from Brazil and Italy and America gathered to remember, to honor the dead, to see the mountain one last time. I didn't want to go. I had spent 50 years trying to forget that mountain. But you insisted. You said I needed to face it, to see it in peacetime, to see what we had fought for. You were right. We climbed Monte Castelo together. Slowly, we were 73 years old. But we climbed it. The mountain that had tried to kill me. The mountain where so many of my friends died. We climbed it in sunshine and peace. There were flowers growing where we had fought, families having picnics where we had bled. The bunkers were overgrown, the trenches filled in, the scars were healing. At the summit, there was a monument, Brazilian and Italian flags flying together, names of the dead carved in stone. I found Carlos's name. I touched it and I cried. After 50 years, I finally cried for him, for all of them, for the boys who never got to go home, who never got to fall in love, who never got to have children and grow old and climb this mountain in peace. You held me while I cried, just like you had held me in those church ruins 50 years before. And I realized something. The mountain hadn't beaten me. The war hadn't destroyed me. Because I had you. Because even in the worst of hell, I had found something worth surviving for. Because love, real love, is stronger than war. We are old now. I am 84. You are 82. My body is failing. The doctors say I have months, maybe weeks. The cancer is everywhere. There's nothing they can do. I'm not afraid. I've been living on borrowed time since 1945. Every year since Monte Castelo has been a gift. Every moment with you has been a gift. I've had a good life, a long life, a life full of love and family and music and joy. The mountain tried to take it from me, but I got it anyway. This letter is my confession and my gratitude, my confession of what I saw and did on that mountain. The things I never told you because they were too heavy to share. The deaths I witnessed, the kills I made, the horror I survived, the guilt I carried. I needed you to know. Not because I want forgiveness, but because I want you to understand that everything I became, everything we built, was built on a foundation of horror. That our beautiful life grew from terrible soil. But also my gratitude. Thank you for finding me in those ruins. Thank you for seeing the human being inside the soldier. Thank you for loving me when I was broken. Thank you for coming to Brazil. Thank you for building a life with me. Thank you for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Thank you for 62 years of love. Thank you for saving me from the mountain. Thank you for giving me a reason to survive. I love you, Francesca. I have loved you since that day in the church ruins. I will love you beyond death. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The mountain was the worst. You were the best. And somehow, impossibly, one led to the other. Somehow the worst experience of my life brought me to the best. That's war for you. It takes everything and gives nothing back. Except sometimes, in the ruins, you find something worth living for. Keep playing our music. Keep cooking our food. Keep telling our stories to the children. Keep the memory alive. Not just of the war, but of what we built after the war. Of the life we made from the ashes. Of the love that survived when everything else died. I'll be waiting for you. In whatever comes next. I hope there's something next. I hope there's a place where the war doesn't exist. Where the mountain is just a mountain. Where the dead are at peace. Where I can finally put down the weight I've been carrying for 62 years. And when you arrive, whenever that is, decades from now I hope, I'll be there waiting. Just like I waited in those church ruins. Just like you waited for me to come back from the mountain. I love you. I love you. I love you. That's all that matters in the end. Not the war, not the mountain, not the horror or the pain or the nightmares. Just this. I love you, and you loved me. And for 62 years, that was enough. Forever yours, João.
João da Silva died on March 15, 2007, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He was 84 years old. He was surrounded by his wife, his 4 children, his 9 grandchildren, and his 3 great-grandchildren. His last words were in Italian. Ti amo, Francesca. I love you, Francesca. Francesca read this letter 3 days after his funeral. She had never opened the box before. He had asked her not to. For 62 years, she had respected his wish. But after his death, she opened it. She read every word. And then she sat in their house, the house they had built together, surrounded by the life they had created, and she cried. Not tears of sadness, though there was sadness, but tears of gratitude for the love they had shared, for the life they had built, for the man who had survived hell and still found the strength to love her. She lived another 7 years. In that time, she told their story, to the children, to the grandchildren, to anyone who would listen. She talked about the war in Monte Castelo and the church ruins where they met. She talked about the young Brazilian soldier who had traveled across an ocean to fight in a war that wasn't his, who had climbed a mountain 6 times, who had survived when so many didn't, and who had found love in the most unlikely place at the most unlikely time. She died in 2014 at the age of 89. She was buried next to João in Rio de Janeiro. At the funeral, their great-grandson played cavaquinho. Their great-granddaughter sang in Italian. 2 languages, 2 cultures, 1 family, 1 love that had survived war and time and death itself. This is their story, a story of war and love, of horror and hope, of a mountain that tried to kill and a woman who saved. of a Brazilian pratinha and an Italian refugee who found each other in the ruins and built a life that lasted longer than the war that brought them together. This is proof that even in the darkest places, love can survive. That even in the worst of times, human connection can flourish. That war, which destroys everything, sometimes, just sometimes, creates something beautiful in the process. Monte Castelo still stands in the Apennine Mountains of Italy. The monument João and Francesca visited in 1995 is still there. Brazilian and Italian flags still fly side by side. The names of the dead are still carved in stone. And every year, on February 21st, the anniversary of the final assault, a small ceremony is held. Veterans, when there were still veterans. Now their children and grandchildren, remembering, honoring, making sure the story doesn't die with those who lived it. This is the story of Monte Castelo. Not just the battle, but what came after. Not just the horror, but the hope. Not just the death, but the life that grew from it. This is João and Francesca's story, and it reminds us that war is not just about what it destroys. Sometimes in the ruins, something survives. Sometimes, against all odds, love finds a way. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even in darkness there is light, please let us know. Leave a like, subscribe to this channel, and in the comments, tell us where in the world you're listening from. Because these stories need to be told. Not just the horror of war, but also the humanity that survives it. Not just the destruction, but also what we build from the ashes. Thank you for listening. And remember, even in the worst of times, love survives. Even on the coldest mountain, hope grows. Even in the deepest ruins, human connection finds a way. That is the lesson of Monte Castelo. That is the legacy of João and Francesca. That is what we must never forget.